So I went from being a high school dropout, climbing the corporate ladder, and even building a 1.5 million a year career for myself. And then I gave it all up. Now in this video, what I want to do is share not only how I did it, but also why I gave it up and then what my plans are for the future. So let's get into it. So the majority of this video is going to be about why I gave everything up. But to really set the stage for that, I need to go back to the beginning and give you some context. When I grew up, I had crippling social anxiety, really low self-worth, zero confidence. I was a mess. And a lot of this was because of things that were going on at home. So for example, when I was 8 years old, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. When you're 8 years old, like one of the most important, if not the most important person in my life was my mother. And seeing her, it literally wither away and lose all this weight, and she was bedridden, it already makes you anxious. Like, am I about to lose the most important person in my life? Now, thankfully, thanks be to God that she was healed and recovered and everything. But only 5 years later, when I was 12, then she had a stroke. But then she slowly started to recover from that, and then she had a second stroke, and this one was much worse. I mean, I was hanging by a thread already. And also, the reason why it was because my mom and dad owned a business together, and so we already were kind of like paycheck to paycheck growing up. It was like always finances, money was always a point of stress and worry and anxiety in the home. Now, when she got sick, they could no longer work. And so it was immediately, we're in a financial crisis. And again, you take someone that has crippling social anxiety, zero confidence, there's no sense of security in their life anymore. And then the thing that kind of was the straw that broke the camel's back was I was at school. I'm in the 8th grade at this point. I remember going to the library to check out a book, and these two bullies, I knew who they were, and they were just total jerks. These two bullies, I was definitely inappropriately touched and groped, and they were laughing while they did it. It was simply just to humiliate me. And you take a person like that and then you put them in that type of situation. I mean, I was like, my world was turned upside down. I was wrecked. And probably the reason why, more than anything, was this feeling of why didn't I have the balls to fight back? Why didn't I fight? I wanted to make them pay. And I think something inside me, because of my lack of the confidence, my lack of identity, that it wasn't there. And so I was really angry that I didn't do anything about it. But what I did do is I went home. I'm a total wreck. I told my mom and dad about it. I just didn't want to go back to school. And so they decided to pull me out of public school, and my brother and my sister, and to homeschool us. But, we already were in a mess, the way that, the home was, that their time, my mom's still recovering and stuff, the whole left side of her body was paralyzed, and essentially it just never happened. And they just never started schooling me. And so things got so bad financially that it was an issue of whether we could get groceries. And I remember my dad, getting down on one knee, and where I'm he's eye level, and he's like, "Bud, this is when you become a man." And essentially telling me it's time to go to work. So we need to go work. So I started going to work with him, because they couldn't afford to pay any employees, and these jobs needed to be done. And so I'm 13, and I am cutting tile, building showers, painting walls, sanding cabinets. And that essentially happened for 3 years, and I just never even started high school. Then fast forward a little ways, I'm an adult, and I'm wanting to build a life for myself. And but I had no high school education. There's no way I could go to college, and I didn't know what to do. How do I, that's just how I was taught, was you need education in order to build a career for yourself. So I essentially started hunting online for any information on how to make money online, how to build a business, and actually kind of found out that a lot of billionaires and entrepreneurs and people, they actually didn't go to college. And a lot of those people actually didn't really have they maybe didn't perform in school very well. Some of them did, of course. A lot of them didn't graduate from college. So I realized that my belief system was totally wrong. And I ended up buying courses. Some of them, I remember the first one was Consulting Accelerator by Sam Ovens. And then I bought a lot of Tai Lopez's stuff, and I'm trying to learn. I'm reading books. I didn't even have the money to buy a lot of books. So I remember going to the library and just getting a library card and thinking to myself, wow, how come nobody goes to the library anymore? Like, this is amazing. I was reading as much as I could. So as I am reading books and buying these courses, I started learning a lot about marketing and social media marketing. And this, I mean, you have to think this is back in, 2015 at this point. And my mom and dad had a ministry. So they went from doing this business, my mom recovered, and they ended up going into ministry. And, the only thing I was aware of or knew really was just them and their business. And so I wanted to help them with the ministry. And so as I'm buying these courses, I end up really applying what I'm learning about social media and marketing to the ministry and the nonprofit. And so I'm like managing their Facebook at the time, and I eventually get a job offer at my church. And that's really where I started learning a lot about marketing and engagement and, things like that, branding. So I was going, learning Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop and making images and graphics for the social media accounts. And so one thing led to another, and I ended up signing on, there was a coffee shop and a restaurant that's paying me a fee. And I'm like now making money with this business. And I was like really excited. And so I just keep working on that. And I end up actually niching down on running ads, like Facebook ads, for chiropractors and like naturopathic doctors. And that, again, was working really well. I had a few clients, and I wasn't like balling yet, but I was, it was enough to where I wasn't financially stressed out of my mind anymore. And so then I started seeing some ads, and I joined this like Facebook group from this company called Traffic and Funnels. And they had this coaching program, and really I thought it was like $1,000 course because that was kind of what was common. So I get on the sales call with their team, and the closer that I met with, his name was Peyton, and they take me through, he's taking me through the sales process. I knew what was going on. It's like, it was a sales process called a consult, or strategy session, but it was really just a sales call. So, and he presents the offer to me, and it's like 10 grand. And I was so, I was like, I don't have that. But I was like, I'm going to find a way. Like, I'm going to sell whatever I need to sell. And I remember even selling my bed frame, literally sold my bed frame and just slept on the mattress on the floor, sold some guitar pedals and, whatever it was to be able to pay for this. But eventually what they did is they ended up just offering me a job. And so I joined their team, and literally I took this job without knowing the title, without knowing the pay. I literally didn't know what the job was. I just saw this as an opportunity to learn. I was like, I get to be inside of like a thriving online business. I'm gonna get to learn so much. This is a growth opportunity. So I did it, and it was very hard to work there because it's like, the standards are so high. Higher than anything I've ever experienced, and up to that point. So I end up like losing all my clients. I'm like, I just went all in on like, I'm just gonna crush it here. And what ended up being the job was I was a sales coordinator. Essentially, it's an admin assistant for the sales team. And so I wasn't, I had crippling social anxiety, and now I'm on this like sales team, and that was my greatest fear. Like, my number one nightmare was having to talk to people for a living. Now, luckily, I wasn't actually having to meet with these prospects or leads, but really what I wanted was to be on the marketing department. I wanted to learn ads. I wanted to just be at my computer. I don't want to talk to anyone. But what was interesting was, as I'm on this team, I'm seeing these people, these guys just with so much confidence. They were very eloquent in the way that they articulated and communicated with these prospects and these leads. It was very impressive. And it was kind of like intoxicating. Like, I loved it. I absolutely was like, I want to be like this. I want to be confident. I want to be assertive. I want to be charismatic. And I decided to go all in and throw myself into sales as some sort of self-induced exposure therapy. And the founder ended up letting me like call leads and set appointments. And that went really well. I actually crushed it. I started training other setters, and I'm making more money now than like I'd ever made. And I was planning on staying there, but one thing led to another. So I left that company, and I decided, I'm going to start my own business again and actually consult and train people on how to build these setting teams and get more out of, their list of contacts and leads. So I signed up a couple of leads, and I started making a name for myself, and I took over the sales department at this other company. And through taking over the sales department, I helped scale a company from 100,000 a month to 500,000 a month. They were now at a $500,000, and we did that in 4 months. And then my friend, Cole Gordon, he founded this company called Closers.io. I think at the time it was called Closers and the Leaders. And he starts this company, and then he reaches out to me and essentially poaches me. Like we knew each other, and we had a plan, and I was like, dude, like, let's go. Yeah, I was so into it. And I knew that he was very intelligent, and he was really good at sales. He was really good at teaching people how to close, and I was really good at the setting stuff, and I was really good at sales now. And so just in that short amount of time, from starting a company, my own agency in like 2016, then 2018, taking this job at this other company. And then by the time 2020 hit, I went from being, again, a sales admin to the top 1% in my industry, like in the entire industry of like closing. And then take over the sales department for Closers.io. Now for the next 18 months, we scaled this company aggressively from like 0 to about like 30 million in annual revenue. And throughout that time, I had, through just working really hard and negotiating terms with Cole, I had acquired, equity. I had acquired like an actual profit share. And so in 2023, in just those 3 years, again, we scaled this up to about like 50 million at that time. And I was making, in 2023, made just under 1.5 million. And now also being promoted to president and CEO, and I was crushing it. And this is like something that, we were the most prominent company in our entire industry, the online space, and working with people like, we had clients like Tony Robbins and Grant Cardone and Brooke Castillo and Amy Porterfield, Agora Financial, Frank Kern, Dean Graziosi, like just some of these people are like my heroes. I remember what's funny is there was this moment where it was very surreal because I literally, like, I remember I closed Tai Lopez, and whom, was one of the first courses I ever bought in 2016. Like going through his course and being like, whoa, like this is like someone I looked up to fast forward to several years, and I'm closing him to learn from us. It was very surreal. And that same year, I remember we sponsored this event called The Vault by Patrick Bet-David, who he was one of my heroes. During that phase of like building my own business and working at Traffic and Funnels, I was just absorbing all of his content. He had this interview with Kobe Bryant that just blew my mind. I watched it maybe 25 times or something. And we sponsored his event, and then got invited to his house after the event was over. And I'm like at Patrick Bet-David's house, and I get to meet him and tell him, the story I'm telling you. And I was just full of so much gratitude, and it just meant so much to me. And it kind of brought meaning to the struggle, meaning to the climb. And you would think that at this point I would just ride that wave. But what's crazy is, as Cole meets with me and he offers me more equity, he wants me to, become like the face of the company and really like run it without him, which would increase my pay even more and in my status in the industry and all these things. But inside, I remember like that moment where he's offering this to me, and I just heard God tell me, I have something else. Like, I have something else for you. And I couldn't get it out and tell him no right away, but I wanted to think about it, pray about it. So he gave me some time. That's when, during that time, that's when God really gave me the vision for what we're doing now. And it was probably one of the biggest sacrifices, because the way my contract was set up at Closers, that if I resigned and left, I was like forfeiting my equity. And that was what I worked so hard for years to do. But I knew, like, there was so much peace about it. It was scary, but there was peace. And at the same time, I knew that there was impact to be made. And what that impact is what I'm building now, which is New Well. And what New Well is really the culmination of all these learning lessons. So going from, again, being, not even having gone to high school, to becoming an executive and an entrepreneur and like the CEO of a company, getting into sales and learning about culture. Like, what was it about certain culture, like the culture of Traffic and Funnels, I ended up leaving. And then the culture that took me away from this other company to joining Kohl's, which this company was Tribe of Buyers, the company right before I went to Closers.io, was doing $500,000 a month. We were crushing it. But I joined Cole, who was only doing 100,000 a month. So it was a smaller company. And what drew me there was the culture. And I realized, that the culture was so important. And over time, having scaled a company, I had like 120 employees that I'm managing, 2 different profit divisions, and I actually built 2 executive teams. So the first one was on the B2B branch, and then I built an executive team on the B2C. And like I was just taking note and learning so much about people, systems, how to cultivate a high performance culture that attracts A players. I mean, I had people who were quitting their own companies. Like they had their own companies and quitting them to come and join us as a team. And what was it? What was it that, like, why would people sacrifice that much to come and join what we were doing? And it all comes down to something I call organizational physics. Now it probably sounds boring, AKA culture. Okay, it's culture, but there is a science to it. And everything that I learned internally, like how to perform at a high level, how to break through limitations, how to rewire narratives and beliefs, and then how to essentially extend that to other people, help them to break through the limitations, and to get people to rally around a vision and to really perform at a high level. And that alone is difficult, but how do you actually, not only how do you do that, but how do you sustain that for a very long time? And that's one of the hardest things. But everything I learned about that became the bedrock and foundation of New Wealth. And what I feel God calling us to do is to come into these companies that have an amazing product or service that are making a positive impact, but help them to grow and scale through being able to wield cultural systems. Like I said, organizational physics. Like, how do you actually create a formula? How do you control? How do you actually cultivate, like it's a system, a high performance culture because when you do that, it really does become like its own kind of like living organism, and it attracts A player talent. It inspires innovation. And what do I mean by that is that most entrepreneurs and founders are thinking about business like, how do I create an amazing product? And then how do I create an amazing promotion to market that product? But what I think all the greatest businesses in the world, what they've learned to do is, instead of just thinking about it that linearly, that 2-dimensional, they think about it 3-dimensionally. And instead of how do I create a product or service, it's like, how do I create a machine that just works and on autopilot spits out great products, great promotions, great services? And that is what I'm talking about. It's all about team. Instead of mastering the instrument, learn to play the orchestra. And that's what I absolutely love doing. And so that's what we're doing. So we're helping companies now learn how to cultivate a high performance culture, systematize it so they can attract A players, they can keep their people. And when you do that, scaling, growing revenue, all of that's inevitable. What makes New Wealth different from maybe other, executive coaching businesses or consulting companies is most of these companies really struggle. Like they approach what we are helping to solve, but they approach it in like one way. So they may provide a platform or a benefit, like an employee benefit. It's like really hyper focused on like fitness. I think, and there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself, but I think that it's limited. Or they may provide, access to an app that's just like it's just mindfulness and spirituality, like meditation and things. Again, nothing wrong with just that inherently, but really what makes a company thrive is when you approach it holistically. And what do I mean by that is that we are spiritual beings, but we also are physical beings and we're mental beings. So psychology, physiology, and spirituality, we are a tripartite being as human beings. And you have to approach it all three. And so that's what we do. So we approach the company's performance, the organizational health of the company and we include spirituality, and specifically biblical spirituality. And that's what sets us apart. It's not just about meditation. It's about understanding purpose and having, a strong belief system and understanding your identity in Christ. And these are things that really helped me become an amazing leader. And I think other people, and I've seen it just transform companies and transform leaders to become and perform at a level they never thought possible. But you also have to align your physical health. You have to learn to regulate your nervous system. How do you get into flow state? How do I optimize productivity? And then also psychology, like how do I navigate, situations where, again, like I said before, like how do I get rid of social anxiety? How do I inspire confidence? These are all aspects that are important. And so we're approaching this we include the biblical principles with the scientific principles, and that alone, when you combine these two things, you become unstoppable. And so that's what we're doing. And what I love about this is actually something that probably a lot of people don't really know. But when Jesus in the Bible uses the word apostle, that was actually a Roman military term where he says, "You will be my apostles." But he didn't just pick that word at random. Like nowadays, we hear the word apostle, we immediately think of the disciples. But in those days, there was a Roman military role that would go into a land and they would reform culture to establish Roman infrastructure. So if Caesar were to walk into that place, that town, city, whatever, it would look like Rome, sound like Rome, smell like Rome. It's supposed to be like Rome, right? And that's that role, that person who was in charge of doing that was an apostle. And so when he commissioned us to be apostles, essentially he was telling us to go into the world and reform culture into the culture of the kingdom of God. And what's crazy is I've been so obsessed about culture. I had no idea that this were true until someone told me what that word actually meant. And I love the idea of all of us really embracing, apostleship, and to go into, whether it's the culture of a company, it's your culture inside of your home, your marriage, your family, your culture in a city, a nation, a community, your church. We are all called to reform culture. And so that's essentially what New Well is doing for companies. But New Well is also like the for-profit business that is funding the nonprofit, or the nonprofit, which is new, is what we are doing is reforming culture inside of homes and families by really prioritizing mental health, but merging Jesus and mental health and making it accessible to everyone. And so very passionate about this, very excited, and our team's really coming together. And I know that giving up what I had was such a sacrifice. It was a hard decision, but it's well worth it, no question.